Hey there, good afternoon and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph and I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and other forms of rock music. So, this is the inaugural launch of my new series, which is My Strange Fascinations. Basically what that's about, and I've said this on the last couple of episodes of this week, try to prepare people for what I'm going to be doing here. I've taken 30 rock artists or rock bands, and I'm going to talk about their influence on me, why I like them so much, what is it that fascinates me about their character, what things happen in their life that are impactful upon me, all these type of things. What this isn't going to be, and I want to make that clear right away, is this is not going to be a definitive history of these individuals, because to be quite honest with you, I don't know the definitive history of most of them. So, and I don't really know that I need to know that, but there are other people that are doing stuff like that, and they do it much better than me, and have better are in a better suited situation to take advantage of that, and I enjoy them, and you should enjoy them as well. So anyways, I'm just going to talk about the artists who've had some kind of an impact on me some way or another, and during this course it will be somewhat revealing about my own character, which is, some people have asked to know more about me, and I'm not really a person that likes to talk about himself too much, so I'd rather reveal myself in this fashion. So if that's something you're interested in knowing, then this might be of interest to you. Okay, and the artists that I'm going to talk about have all, at different periods of time, had some impact on me in some way or another at some time. A lot of them are long ago and in the past, but and this is not a definitive list of my favorite artists, because that would be easy, right? I could just go take my top 30, talk about them, and then that'd be the end of it. But I don't want to do that. And I'm going to do them in a particular order. I originally wasn't going to. I was just going to present them as they came up on my list, and not concern myself with who was better or who was worse or any of that. And I'm still not really concerned with that. What I am going to do here, though, is going to put them in somewhat of an order of how they impacted me, like to my own feeling about, okay, so this guy was much more impactful to me than this guy, so he would go first, so that it doesn't get anticlimactic at the end when you got some no-name, or not no-name, but somebody who may or not have had that much of an impact on me. I want the most impactful people to be at the end, because the conversations will be larger and longer because they've had more impact, So, and then there's always those people who like to guess who's going to be at the end. They like to, he's going to put this person at the end for sure. They like to be right, and it kind of makes them feel like they know the person that they're talking about. And so I like to give those people some attention as well. And those are the people that I should be giving attention to, because they're the main subscribers and the people that have contributed to the show the most, and they're the people that I'm out here for, because they're the ones who, like me, want to be involved and promote this wonderful thing that we call rock music. Okay, so anyways, having said all that, I hope that's reasonably clear as to where I'm going to go with this. And of course, there may be some changes to it as we go along, because things get discovered as you're going along. Say, oh yeah, I never thought about that. Maybe I should include more of that. It was kind of like when I did the first series on rock artists that thrilled us but have since passed on. Somebody made a point of saying, you should talk a bit more about why they died, what happened to them, because that's more interesting. So I thought about that, and from that point on, I started contributing and talking more about that stuff as well. So if something comes up of that nature, yeah, absolutely, I will try to incorporate it. Okay, so there we go. We've had our kind of description about what's going to be happening on this episode. Episode 1 of My Strange Fascinations will feature Beatle legend, music legend, and inspirational leader of the peace movement for the world. And we're talking about John Lennon, of course. John Lennon is a very kind of controversial character, I think. He was kind of the spiritual leader of a lot of these peacemongers, and I don't like to use that word in a negative fashion, people who sought peace from the 60s. He was kind of a poster boy from them. Not just him, but there was a lot of artists, but he's the one that I thought of when I thought of this peace movement, John Lennon, right? But he also peeved off a lot of people because he was outspoken and he did things that created problems for especially the US. But he wasn't a sit on the fence individual, and for that I respect him 100%. I think he's one of the great rock musicians in the history of rock music. Certainly the Beatles propelled rock into the stratosphere and brought forth a lot of stuff that had never been done before. And the reason they did this, I think, is because first of all, they were so successful and drawn so many people in that they now were in a position that they could do and take risks and do what they wanted to do and propel this thing. They had the resources, they had the attention of the people, and they had the creativity among the four of them to create this and bring it forth. I don't think of myself as a huge Beatle fan or a huge John Lennon fan. I like them both. The Beatle music I like a lot. It's not among my top favorite Beatles, but I respect their abilities and the things that they did. Some people will say, you'll hear people saying, oh yeah, well that wasn't that great when you listen to it. What's so special about that? Well, what was so special about it is that nobody else was doing it. Nobody was even close to doing what they were doing. They put a lot of elements on the map, and one of those elements I believe that they put on the map, and John Lennon was a leader in this, because Paul McCartney, as great as he is a singer and a music writer and everything, he was more of a pop-oriented guy. He liked the pop love and ballads, and he did them well. He may be the best at it. One of the best at it anyways. But John Lennon liked to do things differently. He liked to move in a direction that wasn't taken by everybody else. He liked to experiment with music. And George Harrison was like this too, and a lot of John Lennon's ideas, I believe, came from George Harrison's influence as well. So anyways, I think that the Beatles were the first they were one of the first psychedelic bands. They became psychedelic in their second career. Once they got past that pop phase, which was huge, that drew them in. That drew a lot of people in. But now that they had people's attention, they began to experiment with lots of different things, drugs included. Yeah, I'm going to have to say that was included quite a bit. And John Lennon was, of course, a leader in this area as well. They had a lot of spiritual influences here, more led by George Harrison than the others, but still a lot of that was brought into music, and their Indian influence in their music, of course, that has created a genre of music by itself. But they started down the path of musical experimentation and psychedelia, and psychedelic music may have come as a result of them. In fact, I know it was a huge influence on music. This, of course, led to progressive rock, I think. I think these are the direct roots of progressive rock. I don't think the Beatles were a progressive rock band in the strictest sense of that word, but they certainly had some progressive elements, and they certainly rock bottomly solidly started the kind of concept stuff, that the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour, the first one being more influential, that those kind of put the seeds of progressive rock right there, right? And for what do they call it now, concept albums, that was Sgt. Pepper's the first concept album. You tell me. I don't know. Was it as big as Tommy? I don't think so, but definitely was influential. So, and John Lennon, of course, he was the leader, in my opinion, of the Beatles. I saw him as the leader. Some people would say McCartney was the leader. They were co-leaders, I guess. But John Lennon was, to me, the kind of musical leader of the band. He's the one that drove them into the realms that they went into, I believe. Much of the stuff that the Beatles did of psychedelia, I think John Lennon had an influence on. Also, his vocals are the best of the four, in my opinion, and that's probably why he sings the most. He just has one of those kind of British sounding voices that is just, I wonder often if he'd been with some of these other bands that he tried to put together, like the one with Eric Clapton and Stones guitarist Keith Richards and Mitch Mitchell from the Stones. They recorded a song and were planning on being a band, and then I guess there was probably some conflict of touring with the Stones, so they ended up not doing it. But I wonder what that would have produced. And he was supposed to be the lead vocalist here. I certainly think it would have been a fantastic thing to listen to. I would have wished that had happened. So some of the influence John Lennon had on me, well, he was the guy that made me think about the progressive rock movement, like some of the psychedelic stuff he was doing. I thought, well, that was amongst the first kind of psychedelic music that I listened to was the Beatles. I thought, wow, this is very different than a lot of stuff on the radio. And a lot of this stuff was on the radio, but I just thought this guy has such a... I just thought he was just a real leader in every category of music, right? His death had an impact on me too, because it wasn't that I was a huge John Lennon fan. He was never a top 30 guy for me or anything like that, but because he was so well known and because he had such an impact on the music that I listened to, his death had a huge impact, because he was one of the first people that died while I was listening to music. Once I became a rock music person, he was one of the first people to pass on that had an impact on me. Yes, Bon Scott died in the same time period, but I didn't listen to Bon Scott prior to Back in Black. I didn't even know who he was. So he didn't have a huge impact when he died for me, because I didn't know anything about him at the point in time. I didn't even know his name. I thought down that when my friend showed me the cover of AC/DC, I thought that was him in the middle, and that turned out to be Angus Young. So that's how little I knew about him. But John Lennon probably was the greatest impact from the first group of people that had died in rock music that I was aware of at the time. And the other one was, of course, John Bonham, who died not too long before or too long after. I think it was just before. I think he died just before. So within a short period, these two iconic figures died, and that's when I became completely aware that these guys are mortal. We all know that people are going to die in that, but we never think that the musicians we're listening to are ever going to stop being great. And then when two of them like that pass right away, it makes you stop and think. And that happened when I was starting high school, so that was a big impact on me at the time. I began to think about that. I never thought about it before that, because obviously celebrity, when they die, make you think about your own mortality, because if they can die with all their celebrity status and famousness, I can too, right? So the other impact was that when he died, that he had just released that double album of his, Double Fantasy, which I never really liked that kind of poppy music, but I loved his voice, and that album has a big impact for that year, that time period. 1980 and 1979 were the two big years for me in rock music. Most of my favorite stuff comes from those two years. And this was one of those albums that came out in that time period. So the other thing about John Lennon is that it was blown up, and so it was all over the news. When Bonham died, it was kind of big in the rock world, and people that listen to rock music were impacted by it. But when John Lennon died, everybody was impacted by it. And I remember coming home and thinking, wow, how can that happen? How can a guy of that status be allowed to be killed? I just couldn't grasp it. So for me, that is the biggest impact of John Lennon, unfortunately, was that he was one of the first well-known rock stars to pass on my watch, I guess is what I would call it. And so, it's been 42 years later, and I still think the man has incredibly touched a lot of music. So for today, my first episode of My Strange Fascinations is with Beatles legend John Lennon, who I think is just one of the greatest rock musicians of all time. So there you have it. That's episode 1. Got anything to say about John Lennon that I don't know, or maybe there's something that I had completely forgotten to talk about that had an impact on me, but I don't remember it because it's 40 years or more in the past. Please make comments about it. I love hearing these things because it adds to my cumulative knowledge of these people, and I've learned a lot about certain individuals I knew nothing about prior to doing this channel. So there you go. So please like and subscribe if you like it. And I hope you enjoyed this episode on John Lennon, the first episode of my new series. And you have yourself a great day. From Prog Monster. Bye.